This is the Lift, a gaming mouse released by NZXT back in 2022. Jack reviewed it on the channel back then, and it received a respectable 7 out of 10 score and a worth considering award over on KitGuruTech. That's our website for anyone that doesn't know. Well, today I'm going to be looking at these. This is the Lift 2, clever naming, to find out how it's improved on the original and just what these two mice and two different shapes do a bit differently.
Unleash the power of RTX 4080 Super with superior liquid cooling.
Hi guys, I'm Matt and welcome to KitGuru. So the Lift 2, as you can probably see, is a wired only mouse just like the original, but it does improve over the first generation NZXT mouse in pretty much every other area. For a start, it now comes in two different shapes. The Lift 2 Ergo, which has an ergonomic, contoured, right-handed design, and then the Lift 2 Symm, which is the white one, which has a symmetrical body shape. Aside from that difference in shape and also a few grams of weight, the two different variants of the Lift 2 are pretty much the same mouse in terms of specs and sensor, or they are exactly the same mouse in terms of specs and sensor. Here's a quick comparison of what's changed when compared to the first generation of NZXT mouse, the predecessor to this mouse if you like. These two are lighter. The original came in at 67 grams, whereas the new models weigh 58 grams for the Lift 2 Symm and 60 grams for the Lift 2 Ergo. Max DPI has increased from 16,000 to 26,000. NZXT have gone for optical switches in the new mice as opposed to the mechanical switches found in the first gen. That leads to increased switch longevity of up to 100 million clicks, 5 times that of the original, which was only rated up to 20 million. That's still a ridiculous amount. The sensor has been updated to the Pixart PMW3395 over the Pixart PMW3389 that's found in the OG NZXT Lift mouse. This leads to the jump that we see in the DPI that I mentioned a second ago and improvements in IPS speeds. I'll go into more detail about the sensor later in the video though. Polling rate has also increased from 1000 Hz on the original to up to 8000 Hz on the new versions. The new models are now compatible with NVIDIA Reflex on supported monitors. And finally, NZXT have dropped the RGB completely and added some micro dot texturing to the sides of the shell for additional grips. The price for these new mice has also changed slightly. The original models launched at $49.99. The Lift 2 is launching at $52.99. Which isn't that much difference. And to be fair, there's quite a lot that's been improved for that £3 jump in price. Looking at the design first of all then, the Lift 2 comes in two shapes as I mentioned, with both of them being available in either black or white matte finishes. I like the matte finishes on not just these, but almost all NZXT products. It looks clean and modern and doesn't show up fingerprints that much. The original Lift mouse had different coloured side buttons, scroll wheel, and then DPI buttons, like the black ones that can be found on the white first gen Lift that I've got here for comparison. And while the original was available in a whole host of colours, you could get all different sorts of accenting. I don't see anything hinting at that being the case with the Lift 2, which is kind of disappointing as I really liked the looks of the black and yellow original Lift mouse. Focusing back on the new versions though, NZXT have added some subtle branding in the form of an NZXT logo on the top of both different colours. I like the minimal approach they take towards branding. It doesn't stand out too much and doesn't look tacky or over the top. The two different shapes are an obvious difference. The Symm is a fair bit smaller than the Ergo. The latter feels quite fat and chunky when it's in my hands, whereas the Symm feels much more compact. Both mice have the same button layout and the same scroll wheel design. There are 6 buttons in total, left and right click obviously, side buttons, a DPI switch and then the mouse wheel click. The wheels are colour matched to the bodies and both handle grip with the same dot patterned rubber-like coating. The sides of both are coated in a textured microdot finish which does add a bit more grip. It's a needed addition over the original as the coating on the new models, which is soft and smooth, isn't quite as grippy as the first generation Lift mouse. Flipping the mice over reveals how NZXT have managed to shed the majority of the weight from both models, the majority of the weight that they've saved over the original one. The original has a pretty standard looking bottom side, whereas the Lift 2 Ergo and Lift 2 Symm both have skeletonized frames. A lot of plastic has been removed to bring the bulk down. The skates are made from 100% virgin PTFE and are quite a bit smaller than those found on the original. The new models do feel quite a bit slower on a mouse pad. So much so that I spent a good few minutes trying to figure out if there was plastic peel left on the skates that I'd missed. But it turns out there wasn't though. The new mice are just slower overall. As I mentioned earlier, RGB has been dropped completely from the Lift 2, which will either please or disappoint you depending on where you sit in the RGB versus no RGB debate. I don't think it's a big miss at all, but then again on the flip side I do think the RGB implementation on the original Lift mouse looked pretty good. It was kept quite classy. The mice, as I mentioned at the very start of the video, are wired only. The cables are non-detachable and they feel good, just like on the first generation mouse. They don't catch or snag on my desk at all, and they only add a very, very slight feeling of drag when flicking and sweeping with the Lift 2. Overall, I mostly like the design of these new mice from NZXT. I think product design is one of their strong points as a brand as a whole. I like the matte colours found on most NZXT products, and that's no different with these. I really hope they bring the colour choices back, as more choices for consumers is always nice to see. If you're looking for a new chair, then you should definitely check out Booley's. I'm currently sat on their Ninja Pro gaming chair, which is one of 3 models from their gaming series alongside the Elite and the Master. So if you're looking for something new to stick in your setup that you can sit on and game and work, then I recommend definitely checking out boolies.co.uk. Now, one area where the original Lift mouse received a bit of criticism was its build quality. It feels flimsy and it flexes too much. Things have improved slightly this time around though. The bodies definitely feel more robust and they don't bend or creak as much when you put them under pressure. Not that anyone's going to go around squeezing their mouse this hard, but it's something that I have to point out for the review. Unfortunately, quality control could be better. The white Lift 2 Symm that I have has a bit of a rattle on the scroll wheel, whereas the Ergo model is fine. The scroll wheel stepping is also inconsistent across both mice. The wheel on the Symm feels much more rigid than the one found on the Ergo. And that's not the only difference in the wheels. The scroll click is much more clicky on the Symm model that I've got when compared to the kind of more muted sound produced by the Ergo. The rest of the buttons are pretty uniform across both mice though, so that's a bit of a saving grace. There's not too much wobble in any of them. And then aside from that difference in the scroll wheel clicking, they all feel and sound quite uniform. They're tactile, clicky, and they feel decent. Left and right click pre-travel is pretty good across both of the mice. There isn't that much really, but there is a fairly large amount of post-travel, just like on the original model. Here's a sound test of both models of Lift 2 as well as the original Lift for comparison. I mentioned the sensor quickly at the start of the video, but to go into more detail for anyone that likes a bit of a spec list, the Lift 2 contains a Pixar PMW 3395 sensor, which is capable of up to 26,000 dpi, 650 IPS tracking speed, 50 Gs of acceleration, and a polling rate of up to 8,000 Hz. NZXT have opted for optical switches this time around, as I mentioned earlier as well, pushing the lifetime click rating up to 100 million on the switches. I'll get back to you in the year 2034 and let you know how they're holding up, because I don't have time to sit there and click a mouse 100 million times, but they feel fine. I couldn't find the switch brand listed in any of the information that NZXT sent over to me, but cracking the mouse open reveals that they look like standard TTC optical switches. So to talk about my experience with using the mice then, I've been switching between the Ergo and the Symm while gaming for the past week-ish, And the move from using a wireless mouse to being tethered by a cable has been easier than I expected, to be honest. My favourite shape out of the two by far is the Ergo. I find that shape more comfortable over the Symm. Just like I said in my review of the glorious Model 02 Pro mouse, it just fits in the hand better. That's not to say that the Symm is bad. If you prefer a symmetrical shaped mouse, then you'll more than likely get along okay with it. The slower feel on the pad that I touched on earlier did take a bit of getting used to though. I found myself under aiming in Counter-Strike quite often. Now I could have slightly increased my DPI to account for this and account for the difference in speed, but I've kept it the same for consistency because I'm trying to get better. Tracking and flicking feels okay with the Lift 2 mice. As I mentioned earlier, the cable does add a very, very slight amount of resistance when compared to a wireless mouse, but it's very minimal and it's one of the better cables on gaming mice that I've used over the years. The polling rate being adjustable up to 8000 Hz is a nice to have feature, but in the real world, it isn't that noticeable. But then again, on the flip side, getting that feature on a £50-ish mouse is great to see, and it's going to be a cheaper way for anyone who has never tried out high polling rate to give it a go without having to shell over double the price for one of the wireless options that I've looked at recently. Customising the Lift 2 mice requires the use of NZXT's Cam Software. It's a decent enough piece of software, it works, it's nothing special, it gets the job done. One thing I'm not a massive fan of is how it contains controls and sections for everything but the kitchen sink as default. I don't have an NZXT cooler in my PC, but the panel for it still shows up in their software. And then because I haven't got one installed in my PC, when I click on it, it just advertises their products and tries to get me to go and buy one and shop for one. Luckily, you can turn any of that unwanted stuff off in the settings, but it shouldn't even be there in the first place, in my opinion. I don't have an NZXT capture card. Get the option for it off my screen. Surely it would make more sense for the software and make it more lightweight to only install what's actually needed from the get-go. For the products I do actually have attached to my PC though, Cam works. There's options for changing the DPI steps, polling rate, lift off distance, configuring macros and remapping the side buttons, DPI button and the mouse wheel click. Up at the top you can add various profiles if you wanted to set up the mouse differently for different games, for example, and then you can easily change through them by long pressing the DPI button. Overall then, I don't mind the new Lift 2 mice from NZXT. They're okay. They're definitely an improvement over the originals in almost every way. The added grips on the side do make quite a big difference to the overall handling of the mouse, especially when you compare it to the first Gen 1. The high polling rate, optical switches and overall package of features on offer for just a touch over £50 is quite good, but the market at that price point is very, very saturated. The quality control lets them down slightly. The inconsistencies between the two models was something that jumped out to me while testing them. I do like the choice between having a symmetrical and ergonomic shape at this price point. Shape is the most important aspect of a mouse, so if you decided that an NZXT mouse is going to be the next mouse for you, then being able to choose your preferred shape is great. One concern I do have for these mice though, is that they're going to kind of get lost in an endless sea of £50-ish mice, and there are just so many options out there, and these just don't seem to do that much to stand out. And that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like down below if you did. I'd really appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep up with the latest PC gaming news and reviews. If you go down below the video, you'll find links to our merch store for hoodies and stuff like that. And then in the video's description, you'll find links to our Discord server, our Patreon page, and our website if you want to check any of that out. Anyway, guys, I've been Matt. These have been the new NZXT Lift 2 mouse, the Ergo and the Symm. They're okay for the price. They're not mega expensive, but they're a little bit, I don't want to say they're boring, but they are kind of a bit boring. Anyway, guys, I'll speak to you later. Look after yourselves.